Sometimes the heaviest stories we carry are the ones we never tell. Grief has a way of silencing us, of making words feel both too small and too sharp. But what if writing, the simple act of putting pen to paper, could become not just an outlet, but a lifeline? Welcome back, listeners, to today's episode on the Mindful Living podcast. I'm your host, Sana, as always. And for today, we are going to explore the power of mindful writing as a way to heal from grief. And listeners, my guest has lived in the deep waters of both journalism and loss. With 45 years in journalism, including 25 at CNN, he's interviewed presidents, covered riots, and written political thrillers. But beyond the headlines, he has endured the unbearable, losing his sister to suicide and his youngest son to heroin. And out of that pain, listeners, he has built something healing, not just for himself, but for others. And he now helps people discover how their words, even when they're messy, unfinished, can become a path forward. So, listeners, meet my incredible guest, John DeDakis. So, John, welcome to the show. And I'm really, really honored to have you here with us.
Well, it's mutual, Sana. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. And yeah, I mean, grief is one of the uh, I could say a very powerful but very heavy emotion. It can maybe take us deep into a rabbit hole, or maybe it can really help us, write stories, write creative scripts, write songs, do all sorts of creative things. So it often feels like a weight that has no language sometimes. So, how did writing first become a bridge between your pain and your healing?
I think it began when I started writing my first novel more than 20 years ago. And
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't really writing, or I didn't set out to heal. I don't even know if I consciously realized at the time that I needed to heal. What I wanted was to write a book and to get it into print. But I wrote what I knew. And so the very first chapter of the first book that I was writing dealt with my sister's suicide in 1980. The first chapter deals with that event. I mean, it's not about her, but I drew from personal experience. I was on the scene that day when she died. And so I just was writing as a catharsis. And it wasn't until I look back 20 years now and I see that, all of the six books that I've written have grief as a subplot, as a theme, really, going through it because I write as a series. My protagonist is a young woman in her late 20s. And so that is just part of her character. And yet, as a byproduct, a surprising byproduct, I found that the act was therapeutic. Writing about grief, even though I was really consciously trying just to write a good story, the subtle byproduct was healing and actually getting inner clarity, I think, as well, to the point where I'm actually able to help other people to tap into whatever personal pain they have and make it into
Mm-hmm.
art, make it something useful, something helpful to other people.
I really love that. I really love that. And yes, as I mentioned, grief, is absolutely a very powerful emotion. And John, um, I don't know if it's the right question, but if I may ask, um, through these six books, this series, where your protagonist is a woman in her late 20s, um, was this character, or is this character a kind of, projection of your own subconscious, or your feelings? Was it like you were living your experience, reliving your experiences, your emotions, especially grief, through this character?
I think so. I think that
Yes.
that is it's probably inevitable because a writer is going to be drawing from personal experience and their
Mm,
own, personal psyche. So, um, yeah, I would say that that's probably the case. It's a projection. You're dipping deep into your psyche, and I think that there's a lot of commonality that we have as human beings, and a lot of the differences, I think, to a certain extent, are artificial because
mm,
at our human core, I think that the emotions that we experience, whether you're male, female, or anything in between,
mhm,
is the same. We all have the same emotions: joy, anger, fear, and so all I did was try to tap into the feelings that I know I've experienced. And I coupled that with the conversations that I've had with, numerous people over, decades of my life. And, that is in my subconscious. It's there. And the
mm,
act of writing is like dipping a straw into your subconscious so that when you ask questions to yourself about what if this and what about that? That's like
mm.
taking a sip and the writing and the stories come through your fingers and onto the page.
Wow, I really love that how you weaved it. It's like dipping your straw into your subconscious and taking a sip. I really like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I really, I imagine listeners who are grieving, they might fear that writing will only make the pain worse. But, listening to you, hearing your own journey of how cathartic it was, how therapeutic it was, it really helps show how facing the page can actually soften, not sharpen the ache. That's really
I,
beautiful.
I think there's some truth there, although, I think it is painful. I don't want to downplay the
Mhm.
peacefulness of writing because I think that sometimes it can be kind of emotionally stormy. Um, but so when my sister died, someone suggested that I should move toward the pain. And I didn't really understand that at the time. I can only see the wisdom of that when I look back on my life and see what is going on in society. And I've
Mhm.
discovered that I believe that our society, at least Western society, anesthetizes the pain. We don't want to feel pain. We
Mhm.
want to always feel good, or we want to numb ourselves to the pain. And I think that that can be counterproductive, and that there's a certain healing that can happen when we face the pain and mine it and try to work through it. Because I think that doing so, it's like, for lack of a better analogy, it's like lancing a boil. And doing so, is painful at the moment, but there's a healing that actually is allowed to happen when you're able to move forward in your life.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with you, John. Um, and now of course, looking, at your journey. I mean, you have lived two very different lives. One, in high stakes journalism, interviewing presidents, and then your life, 25 years at CNN, and then the other in the deeply personal world of writing about grief. Um, how do those worlds collide in your work today?
I'm not sure I understand the question. What collides with what?
So these two worlds, in different worlds, the world of high stakes journalism, your
I see.
experiences in there, and then your personal experiences, around grief.
Well, the high stakes journalism, I think what's at the core there is deadline pressure. There's you can't wait for the muse to show up in order to write your story. You just have
Mhm.
to write it and you have to get it right. And so, there's a certain skill set that's involved and there's a certain need, I think, to compartmentalize your emotions, to put them
Mhm.
aside, to
Mhm.
not pay attention to them because you don't have the luxury of wallowing in your feelings. You just have to do the job. And
Mhm.
it's only later that you can emote and analyze what it is that's happened. So I think that there's almost not a collision. It's the it's a separation, I think, between, doing the job and then
Mm.
feeling the feelings.
Hmm. And do you feel that journalism actually gave you the tools to face grief, or did it actually make it harder because you were trained to separate emotions from story?
I don't think it made it harder,
Oh.
because the stories you cover are painful, and it makes you more realistic about life. Um,
Mm,
and I think that the tools that a good journalist has require brevity, clarity, writing fast. And so I think that the profession itself equipped me to be realistic, to be able to
mm,
face the truth, even if it's bad. And it gave me the facility to be able to articulate whatever it is that is going on, whether it's describing an event or being able to navigate the inner emotional and psychological terrain. So I had, because of I was a journalist, I had the tools to do what was necessary.
yeah, that really makes sense. And I think this contrast between fact-driven reporting and then, of course, the rawness of personal grief, it is fascinating. Um, and John, and this has happened with me as well. We often talk about journaling, writing. It's a beautiful way of practicing mindfulness. But many people would say that I'm not a writer. I am not good with words. I don't know what to write. I don't know where to start. So, how do you encourage someone who's grieving to begin putting words to paper without worrying about craft?
I love that question because it's so practical,
Yes.
and it's a realistic question, because I think a lot of people who are going through a tough time, and it doesn't just have to be the loss of a loved one. It can be the
Hmm.
loss of a friendship, your
True.
health, your innocence, a pet, any number of things, a job, and that stirs up emotions, and yet we're not necessarily writers per se, but we are communicators. And I think that's just a basic to the human condition. And so it's my advice to just write. You're not writing for anybody else. It's a matter of plumbing the emotional and psychological depths of your life and your feelings. And
Hmm.
sometimes it can have an outlet in poetry. Sometimes it's just a way of, just writing, almost automatic writing, just getting it down, and it's a way of getting inner clarity. This, you don't have to be writing consciously for anyone else, but it is valuable, I think, to look back on it at some point. There was one person who took one of my classes, and he journaled during the time that his after his wife died, and he wrote a memoir about it, but he wrote it several years after the event. And he told me that when he looked back at his journals, he said, I forgot how angry I was at the time. And so being able to capture your thoughts and feelings and the situations in the moment, I think is valuable, because you're in a sense chronicling a an event. You're chronicling not only something that happened, but something that you are experiencing, that you are living and feeling. And feelings are very fleeting, and it's easy to forget what those feelings are and what how intense they were. But I think, this is in a sense, it's a therapy. It's like working with a therapist if you're willing to be honest with yourself. I went through grief counseling. I met with a grief counselor for about 2.5 years. And at one point, she finally said, you don't need me anymore because you're asking yourself the right questions in your journaling. Because I journal every day. And,
Oh, wow.
it's very therapeutic, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. 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 And I think this will really give hope to listeners who feel intimidated by the idea of writing. or maybe, through any artwork, whether it's through writing songs or dancing or photography or
Mm.
drawing, painting. So yeah.
Exactly. I'm glad you brought those things up because those two are creative pursuits and they come from deep inside. And what they mean, I mean, part of the grief process, I think the ultimate goal in the grief process is finding meaning. That, I mean,
Yeah.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross pioneered the stages of grief, but she only got through five of them. And it was David Kessler, who used to work with her, who discovered that meaning is perhaps, the sixth stage. And perhaps
Mm.
the best place to go, if possible, is to try to make sense of the senseless.
Wow. Yeah. And before we conclude, John, and this is just a more nuanced perspective around writing. Now, a few might say that writing, it is too individual. It's solitary. It can be lonely,
Mhm.
and true healing, it happens better in community, not alone with a notebook or pen or your journal. Do you think that mindful writing can replace human connection, or is it more of a companion to it, like a complementary?
I think that's actually true. I mean, it can be very much a solitary experience, but we're also, I think, social at our core, and I think, thrive when we are in vital contact with other people. And
Mm.
so there's a healing aspect as well, especially if you are in conversation with someone who is in the moment and listening
Mm.
and seeing you, and vice versa, you're seeing them,
Mm.
because it's in those conversations that we get feedback, we get encouragement,
Yeah.
uh, so that um, we can connect with other people. And I think that's a really important thing to mention because, writers do tend, at least the ones who want to be published, are often,
Mhm.
either shy or introverted, and
Yeah.
and that's fine. But I think that there's something to be said for being in vital communication with at least one other person, and maybe more
Mm.
if you're lucky.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. And in your own journey, John, has writing led you back into connection with others, or did it first require solitude?
I think they go hand in hand and are almost simultaneous. Um,
Okay.
Obviously, well, here's one thing I've noticed, and that is some
Mhm.
people, some writers really need to be with other writers when they're writing.
Yeah.
It's almost counterintuitive, but it's an accountability thing with them. They really want to finish their novel, and so if they schedule time where they are writing alongside someone for an hour or something like that, then at
Mhm.
the end of the hour they'll be able to socialize. I think, look, it's a big world, and there are a lot of
Yeah.
people, and everyone is different. Everyone is unique. And so what
Yes.
works for me might not work for you, and vice versa. So I think we can learn techniques and tricks and ideas from other people, but in the end, whatever works for you, I think, is the best way to go. And sometimes we don't discover that until we try different things, trial and error.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's something like, very universal. Very universal.
Right. Yep.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. So, John, of course, if our listeners, they would like to connect with you and explore more about how they can practice mindful writing, how they can embark upon this beautiful journey of writing, penning down their thoughts, what would be the best way?
Well, if you want to get in touch with me, the best way is through my website, which is my name.com. And because it's Greek and tricky, I'll spell it for you. It's johndedakis.com. That's John, D as in dog E, D as in dog A, Kis as in Sam. johndedakis.com.
Beautiful. I'll make sure to have the link and details in the show notes. And John, I must really thank you for reminding us that healing isn't about erasing what hurts. It's about giving it a place, a shape, and maybe even a purpose. And that is so powerful. That is so powerful. So thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. And thank you, Sana. I think you put it perfectly.
So, to all the beautiful listeners out there, if you are listening and carrying your own story of loss, perhaps your pen is waiting, not for a perfect novel or polished essay, but for the simple truth of your heart on paper. Thank you to everyone for tuning into this beautiful episode of the Mindful Living podcast. May this be a gentle reminder healing doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it begins with a single word. With this is your host, Sana, signing off. Thank you.